for me, success is it's not a destination. Kind of back to the journey of entrepreneurship. Are you waking up in the morning? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Are you able to stretch whatever you want to stretch? I'm a very curious person. So curiosity and just being able to get in and learn things is important to me. So I get to do that every day.
Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Blake Squires, whose whole career is an entire lay of the land in and of itself. Blake started his career in the mid-1990s in Los Angeles, where he first capitalized on disruption by recognizing the convergence of technology and media. Around then, he moved back home to his hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, to co-found Everstream, in partnership with both Steve McHale, who we've heard from on episode 196, and Charlie Lougheed, who is one of my co-founders at Axuall and whose story we've heard back on episode 42. Blake served as COO of Everstream through its acquisition by Concurrent Computer Corp in 2005. Blake then co-founded Findaway, a global leader in digital audiobook distribution, and makers of PLAYAWAY, a preloaded device and digital audiobook product. Findaway was later sold to Spotify in 2022, a journey which we've heard a little bit about from Mitch Kroll, Blake's co-founder at Findaway, and Mike Belsito, who was an early employee there on episodes 128 and 52 respectively. In 2011, Blake founded and became CEO of Movable, a software platform combined with wearable technology designed to inspire movement, and he also founded DoctorsOrders, an e-scripting tool serving medical suppliers, which was sold to Cardinal Health in 2018. Venturing into non-tech consumer products, Blake teamed with famed inventor John Osher, inventor of the spin brush, to develop a manual razor called Stubl, which was acquired by Edgewell for their Schick line of razors. John and Blake also developed a unique toothbrush that was licensed to Wagon in the UK. In late 2022, Blake became a co-founder and COO of Bloomfilter, a process intelligence platform leveraging AI to optimize the product and software development lifecycle, a company whose story we've heard a little bit about from Andrew Wolf, Blake's co-founder, on episode 134. In 2024, Blake became a board partner for Greycroft, a leading venture capital firm, as well as becoming a fellow for the global design firm IDEO, for his work in building an offering for venture capital firms and their portfolios of early-stage companies. In addition to many other things, Blake is also a founding advisor to the Ohio Angel Collective. Like I mentioned at the onset, Blake's reflections read like a lay of the land of Lay of the Land. Blake has built meaningful relationships with so many leaders across Northeast Ohio. It is hard to enumerate them all, but just across this conversation, beyond those I have already mentioned, we'll tie in Lee Zappis from episode 7, John Knifick from episode 199, David Levine from episode 132, AC Evans from episode 39, Ray Leach from episode 69, and many more. Beyond the connections, Blake is a formidable builder, inspiring person, and accomplished serial entrepreneur with a deep understanding of how to start, grow, and scale strong teams, brands, and products. Please enjoy this insightful conversation with Blake Squires. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community are the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per employee per year healthcare costs, please visit roundstoneinsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland. So I was thinking about where the best place to start these is, and I've heard you talk before about how entrepreneurship is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. And so I want to start there with how you found yourself drawn to the hardest thing that you'll ultimately do in the first place, and why you find yourself returning to the hardest thing that you can do, and why you found success returning to it over and over again in your life.
Well, I actually refer to it as a disease, first of all. So the hardest, but it's a disease because you can't escape it. Really, I was born an entrepreneur. My parents were very entrepreneurial. My dad's orthodontist, mom's a fine artist, kind of had left brain, right brain going on. And actually didn't know the word entrepreneur until probably I was in college. Just always set off to do what interested me, and the rest followed. And I guess you call that entrepreneurship. Watching my parents being independent, my dad being his own boss, my mom being her own boss, did have this level of independence, which is always important to me. So as I was on crossroads of considering a job, which is maybe once in my life that I've actually considered a job, I said to myself, do I really want to be beholden, or do I want to be able to control my own destiny, have my own time? So that's kind of from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it really just came about by me following what I wanted to be doing at any point in time. And the biggest thing for me in that is, am I passionate about what I'm doing?
What did you find yourself passionate about in the earliest days?
So in high school, I actually got involved in theater, became the technical director of my stage crew in Rocky River High School. And through that, I learned technology. I learned storytelling through theater. So I really started in this creative place that was part technology and again, theater. Ended up with an internship at the Hannah Theater downtown Cleveland doing stage. Then that evolved. I met a guy who owned a lighting company, Electro Stage. So started doing after school concerts and on the weekends down at Nautica Stage. And from there, really kind of fell in love with the world of performance. I noticed who was writing the checks when I'd pick up the check after we would do the light. And it was a company called Belkin Productions. And so my senior year in high school, I said, I need to be working for these guys. So I got an internship. So each phase and step just unfolded in front of itself.
Yeah, I love riffing on this intersection of art and entrepreneurship because I find that the parallels between artists and entrepreneurs really interesting. Because I mean, they're similar in so many ways. With I think the parallel that is most obvious to me is that passion that you referenced. That's just overwhelming and exuded, and like maybe to a degree that is off-putting to other people, and ultimately trying to traverse, a similar kind of product market fit gap in what it is that they're working to build. And
Yeah, and I think it's also the process of creativity and just creativity unto itself. It's like artists, product people, entrepreneurs, we love to create and we like to build. It's interesting when you talk about, and I think about it as music, but art and business. The journey with Belkins, I went off to Ohio State. My sophomore year at Ohio State, Jules Belkin called me and said, would you leave school to come work for us full time? I was 20 years old, and I remember calling up my parents and saying, hey, I have this opportunity of a lifetime. I'm going to accept it. I told them that the only reason why I would leave is I was going back to school. I told the Belkins that. And I told my parents, I'm going to get my degree. I'm committed to that. I believe. And so I took the position, and my job was a production promoter's rep. So I was the person that get the contract after it was negotiated. I would set up the entire concert, I would run the concert, and then do all of the accounting at the end of the concert. And looking back, what I was doing for every concert was I was starting a business. Every aspect of running a concert is starting a business. You have to manage people, you have to ensure that there's compliance, you have to fall under a budget. And then at the end of the show, you either make money or you don't. So it's like these mini product or just these mini startup businesses.
did you have an intuition about that at the time, or is that something you only piece together in reflection, looking at the foundation that working and starting concerts kind of laid for more explicit entrepreneurial things?
It was upon reflection that parallel, but while I was in the middle of doing this, like I was the second chair in producing the Grateful Dead show at the Richfield Coliseum. Now I'm aging myself. That was in 1994. I did Paul McCartney at the Riverfront Stadium, which was a week and a half long process of setting up the stage, doing the show, tearing it down. Um, but so when I was in the middle of doing this job, it definitely, was overwhelming, right? This is more than just doing something and doing it well. This is doing a totality of things at one time with 50 other things coming at you from left field. So in that respect, it came to me in hindsight and reflection, but in the midst of it, I knew I was doing more than just running a concert. I was learning a lot and a lot about business. Again, dealing with creative and with the business side of things.
Did you find your interest and passion evolving from that?
So I did go back to school
That's good.
in Ohio State, and when I went back to school, there's a company in Columbus called Promo, owned by a guy Scott Steinecker. They own the Newport Music Hall and do all of the promotions and productions in Columbus. Because I was with Belkin, I got to know them well. So when I went back to school, I immediately became vice president of Promo West. So I had this kind of dual role of getting through school. School is not my thing. I did get through, thankfully, but was really working hard in my job and doing the talent buying and again production. And the next phase of passion was I started noticing that artists in Columbus, Ohio, there was this whole roots rock movement occurring, and these artists were emerging, and record labels were coming in from the coasts. And so, what did I do? I started an artist management company and started signing up these bands. And in a very short period of time, I got my degree, and then I ended up moving out to LA. And I really call that my true startup business because it was just myself, early 20s out in LA, running around to all the record labels and trying to get the most out of the bands that I managed, was managing their business affairs, but then all of their radio promotion and marketing. And again, going back to parallel of entrepreneurship and the creative side, I mean, again, this was an artist as a product. And so I learned very early on how to represent, how to storytell, how to market, and how to really do as best as you can with what you have in that respect.
What was your vision for the company? Did you have grand ambitions for what you wanted to build it, or how are you approaching, I guess, the entrepreneurial process at that point?
At that point, it was one foot in front of the other, and I had these core values in myself that I wanted to have independence. I wanted to make sure that I was always creating things early on. I knew that I wanted to surround myself with people that I actually wanted to be around. And so there were some core values that I was recognizing. I probably didn't know to call them core values or values at the time, but it was really one foot in front of the other during those times.
Well, maybe even to ground the rest of the conversation, because I mean, the serial entrepreneurship that ensues from there is pretty extraordinary. But in those values, another concept I've heard you riff on before is to be clear about who it is that you are, not just what it is that you're doing. And you mentioned maybe it was only after that you were able to simply articulate maybe that those were values and these are the things that are important to you. But when did that become clear to you that that is kind of a guiding principle for what it is that you want to be doing?
It came to light, and a company that I co-founded with Steve McHale was called Big Mama Music. So you could do the parallel. I'm in LA, made my way home. Steve was looking to start a music something online. It wasn't even meant to be internet radio at the time. And he went to the Belkins, went to Promo West, and my name kept coming up. So we connected and ended up moving to Cleveland. But Steve, great mentor. I was artist manager. I had appreciation for technology. I had never started a company, certainly a venture backed, or at least desired to be venture backed company. So Steve, starting almost day one, he gave me a book called Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. It is based on servant leadership, its truest sense. And so that really stuck with me in a way to not only serve others, but it is in order to do that, you need to be very values driven as an organization and really get to the heart of not what you do, but who you are. Christopher Celeste, another partner, phenomenal storyteller, and as well kind of carried the same notion of entrepreneurship is a journey. You really never do figure out what you do. So you sure as hell better start with who you are, and then everything else will follow. And if you start there and then you start to build upon that and think about serving the organization, think about the people and what seats people should be in, it all just starts to stack up and build. But if you just jump off and get after what you do, you'll get lost because you're trying to chase something that you're imagining to be true versus starting at a true point of who you are and taking this journey. Great products are always a journey to figure out how to make them great. Startups are extreme journey, and in software, obviously that the iteration process goes quicker than physical products or consumer products, but it's all a journey. So start with who you are.
Well, and in the spirit of that journey, Big Mama Music is probably a perfect demonstrative example of ultimately it doesn't end as Big Mama Music.
No, it didn't. And it didn't even end as really what we saw as our first business model, which was an internet radio company taking internet audio streaming tools to online newspapers, which at the time, and this was 99, you aggregate all of the internet newspapers, the Night Raiders, the Gannett's, the Pulitzers. When you aggregated their traffic, they were bigger than Google. That was kind of phase one of the business. I always kid, we were so successful in actually deploying our platform and attracting listeners through the platform that we put ourselves out of business because our bandwidth bills at the time were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a month because the cost of bandwidth was so high. We had this massive listenership on the other side. The truth was our economic model, we had an ad engine and we were trying to train newspaper salespeople to sell internet radio versus they were just learning how to sell banner ads at the time. And that whole model, we just didn't have enough time to make that work. I always, in reflection, Everstream would have been Pandora or even Spotify had we had the time. But Steve and myself and Charlie Lougheed, who joined us as our CTO, recognized. I think we had just raised like 14 million bucks, and we were burning 400 or 500 a month on bandwidth. And we're like, this ain't gonna work. So thing down, and that's what we did, and then pivoted, and ultimately the company built software analytics for the cable industry. So Big Mama Music, the Everstream internet radio, to distributed analytics software for cable.
That's an extraordinary journey, to use your word. So if you ground what it is that you're building in something to be true, which is who you are, and then you have this intuition about what might be true and what you might want to do about it, what is your course correction process as you close that truth gap between what you think is reality and what actually is reality? And how is it that you went from this one direction with Big Mama Music to, really an entirely, it would have been pretty prophetic for you guys to have known in advance that is where it was going to go.
It's really staying attuned to what your thesis, and hopefully you have to get to a spot where you have customers. And so being on the road and listening to the market to know how does our thesis fit what's happening. Can we actually sell it to somebody? Can we show value and sell it to somebody? And so it's taking your vision and breaking it down into digestible milestones, goals, and even thinking about what are the financial drivers around the business long term, but even in these short bites, and then going out and just test until you start to see a breakthrough, some traction, some even just positive indicators sometimes, especially when you're early. The biggest thing is finding the right people to join the journey who hopefully are smarter and more experienced or have some set of experience in where you're trying to head. And be people on the bus, or those can be advisors, or but just how do you just data collect all around you to test and prove your thesis. And if you see a danger, then go back and don't wait to pull the ripcord or pivot or whatever it is. You need to change. You need to adapt.
Do you decide what to work on after Everstream? And I'll ground that in one thing that to me is really interesting about the set of problems that you've chosen to build companies around helping to solve is this diversity of industries, of approaches. It's been hardware, it's been software, it's been B2B, it's been B2C. When you think about your compass and kind of orienting around what it is that you were passionate about, how did you approach what problem to solve next?
I didn't make a decision to do something next from Everstream. I took a break. I started consulting. And again, here we go, the theme of a journey, right? I was asked to sit in a meeting because I had this experience around internet radio and e-radio, and some of my consulting at the time was around digital radio. And two predominant Cleveland investors, Lee Zappis and Tom and Brescia, had asked me to sit in on a pitch that a company, an e-radio company, was pitching them on an investment. So I showed up to the meeting, and a guy across the table, Christopher Celeste, had never met him before, and they start pitching. And he's consulting this e-radio company. They start pitching, and I just thought the idea was horrible. And I probably every reason why. But the next day, Christopher called me and he said, "Hey, thanks you." No, I'm just kidding. He said, "Hey, I get you didn't see it, you didn't believe it, and you didn't buy it. I really appreciate how you approach that conversation. I wasn't right. I didn't know. I was just asking questions and giving one man's point of view around their business." And he said, "Do you have time for coffee?" And so he and I just started having coffee. And again, back to values, recognized our values are aligned. He had recently moved originally from Cleveland. He had moved up from Columbus to be with his kids, and he was searching for what's next as well. And he's a marketer, ran agencies in Columbus. One of the agencies put Victoria's Secret on the web when it shut down the internet during the Super Bowl. So kind of marketing technology. I was content technology, and we just started thinking of ideas, and ultimately that became a business called Adcoda. But it was over this series of events of he and I again defining what kind of a company do we want to build, who are we, and then we'll go figure out what we do. And we started to kind of find a beacon and had an idea, and then again back to, okay, is this thesis work, how do we test it, and just keep evolving.
Yeah. So who were you ultimately at that point? What was the vision and the set of values that you had?
Oh, who we were? Well, I mean, whatever the words are, the values are at least all about people being grounded and true to themselves, always a swim lane of business will have the highest level of accountability so that it can have the deepest view and actions around empowerment. So accountability, empowerment, creativity is at the center of everything. So typically, so there's these, every company had different words in the actual core values at the end of the day, but they're all pretty much the same in that context. High growth, challenging, always work to improve yourself and those and the team members around you.
And so what was the problem space? What were you focused on?
Yeah, so well, it wasn't a problem space. I didn't really learn that until much later. But our idea was this was the iPod was just launching. It was 2004, 2000, late 2003, 2004. We were watching how music downloads were $1, and then they were getting commoditized and whole space. And so we envisioned music downloads as a promotional currency. So our customers, we were getting after retailers. So we met with Victoria's Secret and we said, hey, rather than give away certainly a CD, which they used to do, or flip flops with purchase, give away a card where somebody can unlock music, which you can curate. So it gives some brand affinity to the music that people are getting, or they can go out and download any music. But you're also in that moment engaging that person in a digital interaction. So now you can continue to build a relationship with them as a physical brick and mortar retailer. So that was at Coda, and we were out talking to customers, and And they were saying to us, we love this download thing, but it's too complex. It's too early. Can't you just preload content onto a player? And that became the spark of the idea. That became the, again, not really a problem set. We Problems came a little later in this business. Problem sets became a little clearer in this business later, but that ultimately became Findaway. Just that notion of, can you preload content on a player? With Coda, we bootstrapped it. We were raising capital. We were technically the first company to go through Jumpstart. Lynn Ann Grease had it at Case
Wow.
West, and when Ray and actually Tom and Brusher was on the board, and when they recreated Jumpstart in the version that we know it today, back in 2004, Coda was the first company to get funded.
Wow.
We ultimately didn't get that funding in the 11th hour because of just some board votes and the way they were structured early on. The funding didn't come through. So we as Coda had already hired people. We had committed to office space on the aqueduct near Spaces. We were rolling, but then we're out of funding.
In the journey of Big Mama Music to Everstream, given that context, what is the journey then from that kind of dire situation for Ed Coda into Findaway?
Well, it's the same with any journey or situation. Figure it out. Get out, and we weren't just going to go away or shut things down. It's like, go out and meet 50 more people. Like, we actually, at the same time, we had some press, and I had mentioned Christopher is a fantastic storyteller, and we pitched the plain dealer. Pepsi had done this huge promotion around putting download codes on bottle caps, and so we had Coda had nothing to do with that Pepsi promotion, but we ended up on the front page of the business section with Pepsi downloads, blah blah blah, and here's this company at Coda. And that article actually found its way to a group that did end up investing in us, Lauren and Steve Spillman. Lauren's dad and mom were the founders of Matrix, amazing Cleveland entrepreneurial story. Lauren and Steve had partnered with Mitch Kroll. Mitch had just recently sold his food distribution company, and they teamed up and said, hey, let's put our capital, our power together, and let's recreate a lot of the entrepreneurial things that were occurring in Matrix. And let's go find some companies to invest. Well, Mitch and Steve showed up at a lunch with a mutual friend of mine, Dana Wolkoff, and they said, we need to meet people like this. And Dana was like, that's Blake Squires. Let me just pick up the phone and call him. So Dano was the connector then that Christopher and I met, Steve and Lauren and Mitch. And real quick, funny story. They said, come to 23 Bell Street. 23 Bell Street is in Chagrin Falls above Chuck's Beverage. Steve and I, when we started Everstream, our office was 23 Bell Street. We got kind of pushed out. I won't say thrown out because some couple bought the building. Lauren and Steve bought the building unbeknownst to me. So
Wow.
years later, when they said, come to the office, I'm like, well, this is full circle. This is so weird. So long story short, we ended up, they ended up investing, and we hit the ground running with Findaway. And that was the really kind of the coming together in late 2004, 2005 with Findaway.
That's an awesome culmination. I mean, one thing I always take from my time with Mitch is that you're not thinking big enough. You know, how do you raise the bar of ambition? And so I'm curious, as Mitch kind of came into the fold at that point, what was the ambition to be raised? And Findaway obviously has its own incredible journey and evolution that it had over the time that you were building it. So kind of take us through how it evolved.
So Christopher and I, we weren't quite Findaway yet. They made the investment in Coda, and we were still kind of in this crux. We were starting to hear about this preloaded, and he and I would be out on the road and come back to the office, and Mitch was in the office. In the early days, they were investing in us. We weren't expecting to expand and build more of this operating partnership. And we'd be kicking the tires with Mitch. We're like, yeah, preloaded and blah, blah, blah. And so he'd start joining our brain sessions. And it just really kind of evolved to a point where, like, this makes a lot of sense, actually, preloaded audio. And let's go do some work with industrial design firms. And I think Mitch, out of curiosity, was like, "Let me come with you." And we first firm we hired was out of Columbus, Big Red Rooster, and I remember those road trips. It was great, and so we were just all kind of learning and trying to work with each other, and again listen to the market. And first, we were planning on preloading the devices with music, going back to my roots in LA and understanding
Yeah.
content. And we quickly realized two things. One, the economics around music was hard to work on a device that was costly at the time. And secondly, we realized music, small files, people want to be able to customize, and you can never really lock enough, or do you curate it well enough? And the digital music and people being able to curate for themselves, that was already out of the barn. But and then it was when we dawned on audiobooks. They were like, oh my God, it was less than $1 billion market at the time. Now it's 7 billion plus. The majority of listening was still on cassette tapes, box
Oh,
set of,
wow.
because cassettes actually gave you better functionality than a CD. If you eject a cassette from your car, it remembered where you were. A CD, it doesn't. So there were kind of these, like, felt like nuance, but these things that then made audiobooks the right approach. Our first view of the business was it was a consumer product. It was going into retail with audio. So early on, we flew to New York, and I was leading all of the publisher negotiations, and we'd meet with HarperCollins and Random House, and we'd show them this player. We'd say, imagine if content could play itself. And we'd hold up the player. I don't have one here, and it was a book. The front of it was a book, and then we would tilt it up. On the back would be the technology. And so we said, imagine if your content could play itself. And at the time, these publishers were very concerned with digital rights management and piracy. And we're like, look, our DRM is plastic. Like this, your content's going nowhere. It can't offload, download. So the publishers were intrigued, but they said, go find a retailer and maybe we'll license you your content. So, back to the drawing board, back to Chagrin Falls, the three of us went, and we're like, all right, how are we going to get to a retailer? Well, Christopher, I had recalled Larry Pollock was on the board of Borders. Larry, a Clevelander, was on the board of Borders. Younger listeners may not know what I'm talking about.
I went to Barnes and Noble back in the day.
Okay, well, yep, Barnes and Noble, but Borders was a competitor of Barnes and Noble, and Larry Pollock got us a meeting with the CEO, Greg Josephowitz of Borders. And so we went up to Michigan. Imagine if content could play itself. I love it. I'm in. Okay, great. Back to the publishers. Give us your content. And then it was just an all-out sprint to get this product ready to hit the retail shelves.
Had you built a product before?
No, never built a product. And we had 9 months. And at the time, even the best consumer product companies, it would take them 18 months to build a product. And so we knew we had a total disadvantage. So we hired IDEO, the world, they built the Microsoft mouse, the world's most predominant product design firm. And that's a whole story unto itself, right? How we got ourselves in there, and how did we
Yeah.
even get the attention of IDEO? And IDEO typically charges millions and millions of dollars, but we were storytelling. Imagine if content played itself, and look at all of the applications. And they wanted to get involved, and they did. They helped us finalize the design. They did a lot of consumer research and in-home observation of how people listen to audiobooks. And then we hired them to help us through the manufacturing. And we went after a tier one manufacturer, another connection. We went and met with every manufacturer, Foxconn, Jabil, Sanmina, and the head of sales of Sanmina is a Cleveland guy. And so we were able to get Sanmina with IDEO to help us, because here we were, three guys above a liquor store. Our name of our company is Findaway, right? We're out in San Jose doing and then we end up in Mexico in the manufacturing facility, and problems and fires, just like my days back at concerts, right? I felt like, all right, where's where's Paul McCartney here? Because something's gonna break, and it did.
Yeah.
It broke time, and we said, hey, just find a way. We got to get this product out. We've got
Yeah.
to get it orders. within 9
Figure
months. And
figure
we
it
did
out.
figure it out.
What is the importance of storytelling? You mentioned storytelling a few times. I'm just curious, detour, like how would you articulate what it is and why it's so important?
Well, it's communication. We're creating things, and we're creating things out of nothing. So how do you take something that's nothing, put enough of a framework around it, and explain it to others to not just get a reaction, but to evoke an emotion? How do you get a customer to really buy in and love your brand and continue to buy your products? How do you convey to an investor what you're doing and why you can get this done, and all of those elements? And at the end of the day, that's storytelling. How can you simply convey what you're trying to express, uh, to get something done, to share something, to learn something? So yeah, creativity is at the center, and storytelling is part of the mojo.
Yeah, yeah. So you tell a sufficiently compelling and creative story to IDEO. You work through the plan, and how does it go?
Failed miserably, so we put millions of product in Borders. We had Barnes and Noble. We had Hudson News. We had Brookstone and airports. I mean, we were nationwide. We launched this product. It failed miserably. Nobody understood what it was. So then what do? We go back to the drawing board and we're like, okay, we need better point of purchase systems. So we quickly fired up the firm to go build us a point of sale, and then we would go drive around all the stores and actually put it in. And we were trying to do everything, but the product really wasn't meant for retail. And so we were struggling hard. And one of our early hires was Mike Belsito.
Yeah,
Mike had just graduated from Case, and we met him and just saw the fire in his belly. We just knew, and Mike, he's a brilliant,
yeah,
likable guy. And so we said, "Hey, come join us. We don't know what you're going to do, but just come on and join us." So we were trying to figure out retail, and Mike kept, like, he was answering the phone, right? And he's like, "You guys, these libraries keep calling me." Like, "Yeah, yeah, Mike, go away, Mike. Yeah, whatever." And ultimately, he's like, "No, seriously, these libraries." And we sat back and we're like, "That's where this product, instead of retail, this is a circulation item. The box set of CDs becomes even harder. Libraries pay more for products, so the economics are better." And so we very quickly pivoted from retail into institutions and libraries, which changed our manufacturing. We moved from Mexico to China, where we were just built blank units instead of finished goods out of Mexico. We built out the full facility that's still in Solent for loading, labeling. Mike figured out all the packaging, and we all had our goals and our jobs to say, "Hey, how quick can we get into libraries?" And my biggest job at the time, libraries wanted tens and tens and thousands of titles, not the 10 titles, Narnia, Da Vinci Code, that we have retail. They wanted tens of thousands, and they wanted to order one of these, two of those. So I had to go license, just nonstop license content to build up our catalog. And that's then why by 2007, so we pivoted in about a year, got into libraries, and by 2007, 2008, we were a profitable business, just as a rocket ship. And back to storytelling, we would show up at these trade shows, like orange jumper suits on and having fun, and everybody's, these book conferences, and people are like, "Who are these guys? PLAYAWAY, Findaway, what is this?" So we were storytelling, and we were able to just hit the market so fast and hard.
yeah. What was scaling like? What did that feel like? What was new about that you hadn't experienced before, or maybe you did? But what new things did you pick up on as part of that process?
Yeah, we were scaling against the business performance. We were being very careful not to get too ahead of ourselves. At times, we had looked at bringing on significant capital. We stayed nimble with capital, and so we were scaling as the business was growing. And other than, like, with Everstream, we raised our capital. We had to scale fast before we knew it if our business model was going to work. And then when we pivoted, we had to riff. But here it was just this constant, just grow, 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 but under a controlled and profitable base. And again, thankfully, We did a great job with the values. People would come into Solon and walk through the doors and say, I feel like I just transported to Google. Biggest catalyst to growth is the talent we were able to attract. We actually came up with a strategy where we would go after people who had moved away, born and
Yeah.
raised and moved away, late 20s, early 30s, start thinking about families, and we're thinking about moving back to Cleveland. So those are the opportunities for us to say, why don't you come back to Cleveland and work for Findaway? And we recruited Robert Hatta was working in London for iTunes at the time. Caroline Barney was running FTD.com in Chicago. So we were able to bring this incredible talent. So the building of the company wasn't just the founders. We were able to build this culture, empower people, and the whole company was building at the same time because we had the right people in it.
Yeah. I love the Cleveland boomerang strategy. That's a good one. Other people should do more of that.
Yes, indeed.
It's a powerful network. What did you learn about team building and talent and management and recruiting? I'm sure the storytelling element just ties back into it, but how are you able to convince people, much like you did with IDEO?
I'll come back to culture, right? We just really, you walked through the door and you felt it. We made sure that we, always hired entrepreneurs, right? Does this person have fire in their belly? Are they a self-starter? They could be young and inexperienced. That's fine, as so long as they have the DNA. If you hire other entrepreneurs, you just kind of create, and it just feeds and feeds upon itself. That's what we did. Now, obviously, we had a vision for the business. We were very mindful of how we were building and crafting our plans and managing those plans and communicating those plans. And but at the end of the day, once the vision was set and the plans were understood, it's just provide the tools and get the hell out of the way. And that's what we did. And that is, really at the end of the day, you'd ask me like, how do I keep doing this company after company? And that's the formula I learned, right? Define who you are, not what you do. Make that authentic, sure it's true. Align your business with the right people that can really fire in the belly and can become a part of this and feel like they own it. Set the vision, create the framework of measurement of that thesis, going out and testing, and know when you're right or when you're wrong by the data. So that's the business, and then just incrementally go and get out of the way as a leader.
It's an awesome framework. It's simple and it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. Again, we're like halfway through the journey here. How did that framework evolve over time? Like, when did you first articulate that framework?
So after Findaway, my wife had an idea for a company called Movable. We started, and I was a lone CEO, which I'll never do again. Every other business I've had a partner or more, and it was really in that business that now I'm alone. Before I had partners, and in a lot of ways they were instilling it, and I was learning it. Certainly, Steve was at Everstream. And I was watching Christopher, and as Mitch came in, who had more experience than me, and just kind of watching. But then Movable was really the first one that I said, okay, I understand this formula, implemented it. And then later, post Movable, and still do today, I coach the framework through entity called Hatch and really try to align with entrepreneurs and help them in their businesses and their growth. And so it's been proven not just in my own companies, but coaching dozens of different entrepreneurs throughout the years.
Yeah. What was Movable, and why would you not want to be a solo CEO again?
Movable was 2011. There was this movement around wearables. There's a device called a Fitbit, which everybody knows. At the time, it was a clip. So we built literally one of the first wrist-worn activity monitors. The only other one on the market at the time was Nike. Nike had one. And so we built a very inexpensive wrist-worn activity monitor or wearable. And then we built a whole online system to get groups of people moving. So wellness, point system, we'd go into schools, corporate, it was B2B. And why I would never do a lone CEO again is it sucked. It was the company Jawbone and these other companies started coming out. And I don't want to make an excuse around raising capital, but raising capital was almost impossible in a company that needed a lot of capital to succeed. And as a solo CEO, I really wrapped my whole identity and my brand around this company versus it being a company and a thing. And so ultimately I had to step out. I was just not in a good place. And it doesn't help when it's your wife's company, her idea either. It's like, all right, I got to prove
Yeah, I
this one.
gotta make it work.
I got to make it work. I got to make it work. But thankfully, like Mike Belsito stepped in and helped out get the business. The business ended up merging with another company. So it saw another day. But that was Movable.
Yeah. What chapters came next?
So we're in about 2016. And like I said, I had a hard time with Movable. So I consciously said I'm taking a long break, which I never done before, right? So from Everstream right to Adcoda to Findaway to Movable. And so I took a break. Of course, I started observing things. I was observing that people were walking around with a 5 o'clock shadow or stubble. Built a little product called Stubl. Ended up partnering with the inventor of the spin brush, John Osher. We started that journey in 2016. 6 years and 6 patents later, we ended up selling that in 2021 to Edgewell, which is now part of the Schick product line. It's a manual device to contain and wear the 5 o'clock shadow. That was like a product, and that took a while. And in 2016, I was also thinking about the home healthcare market. So I was working on a health hub. That health hub, I had a meeting with Cardinal Health, and I was pitching them and storytelling. And you're at home and you have all of these devices, and somebody in the room put a piece of paper down and said, if you can solve these scripts that come through faxes, we'll buy something from you. Well, went away as the entrepreneur, saw the true need, right? You asked about a need earlier. Saw the true need, put some teams together and built a product called Doctor's Orders that within 2 years, Cardinal Health ended up acquiring. So that was a piece of what was next. And I also in kind of stuck in healthcare after
Yeah.
that, after the Cardinal Health experience, and built a platform called Generator Works, where aligned with some clinicians, a local guy, Joel Tompkins, who's a nurse anesthetist, really a management and an management guy and an entrepreneur. And we had this thesis where we could start a bunch of companies in the consumerism for healthcare space. We did. We bought a company in the patient checkout space, and then COVID hit and sold off the patient check-in system, wound everything else down. And so that was the Generator Works time.
Yeah. So to kind of pull back on a thread that we introduced earlier, which was more in anticipation of things that you would build going forward, like how you followed your curiosity to cross this diversity of hardware, software, industries, B2C, B2B. When you reflect on that diversity of things that you've built, what have you found to be the kind of universal truisms, like the things that really apply across the board just for entrepreneurship writ large? And what do you feel is really industry specific, product specific, business model specific?
So everything that I do is product centered. Stubl is a consumer product. PLAYAWAY was a physical hardware device. Everstream software, DoctorsOrders, yet again another software product. So everything is product. Everything was started from an idea, from a napkin, and everything followed that framework. One element of the framework that we didn't talk a lot about, but relates to storytelling, is the brand. So even for B2B, you still need to behave like a B2C company from a branding standpoint, because that lets you tell the story. So the industry really doesn't matter, right? You can align with people, you can hire experts that know. I mean, there's plenty of analyst reports you can buy too to really understand the industry. I actually think stepping out or coming in from the outside to an industry is helpful to disrupt it, because you see things that people who are inside of it may not see. And then when you show up, there's a level of excitement like, wait, where did this come from? It's like PLAYAWAY in the library conferences, right?
Yeah. How do you think about what brand even is?
So going back to the who you are, it should be an expression of what it is you're engaging with, product, service, and who and what you're transacting with and or you're trusting. That to me is brand, and ability to convey what all of that is to get somebody to engage, to buy, that's a good brand.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned maybe the value of observing from the outside and just kind of that maybe orthogonal point of view to people who are kind of more entrenched in it. I know you've spent a fair amount of time outside of your work building things, helping other people to build things, whether that's in advisory roles or literally on boards themselves. I am curious what you've picked up from that kind of experience helping other people build their products when you are not building the product yourself, that entrepreneurs might miss and that you've taken with you as valuable insight.
Yeah, so in those roles and as an advisor, board member, you do have the benefit of being able to step away. You're not at the center of it. So that's kind of one piece, an advantage, so that you have that ability to look from the outside because you can only know so much if you're not living in the middle of it. But that's a benefit. I think somewhat related to that, companies early on and even through Movable, I mean, I guess the whole thing, right? It's the journey. Being naive is actually a very powerful thing because you keep trying to quest the thirst for curiosity and you keep learning and you keep leaning in. It may take you longer, but you really get to the essence of what things are. And I think being on a board or being an advisor, I can be on the outside, but I can also almost strip away the being naive, at least for myself, as I'm looking at whatever I'm there to do to help. It's more about how can you help somebody ask the right questions? How can you help somebody have the tools to problem solve instead of needing to do solve the problem yourself in that moment? And back to that framework, if you for me applying that framework and elements of it, helping others to really see their path to whatever it is they're working on and then continue to help them to ensure that they have the tools and the guidance to get there without, again, needing to be at the center of it, without really needing to be a naive mind in that mix. And
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. How would you round out the subsequent chapters?
fortunate that for a long period of time, VC that I had just always admired, they tried to invest in Findaway back 2004. And one of the founders went to school where my kids go to school, Revere, so in Ohio. And he was born and raised here in Bath, Ian Sigalo. And about a year ago, I took a position as a board partner. The firm is called Graycroft, coast to coast VC firm. And so they bring me into companies that could use some support and some help. And so my vision of where I was headed was to do more of the board coaching work. And so excited to kind of step in and start off with this predominant firm and doing that. As things happen to reconnect with a great person who is now becoming a partner. And for the last year, I've been working on an opportunity to step back into an operating role, which brings me back into media and the areas where I really started my career and my passion mostly lied. Unfortunately, I can't announce it yet, but hopefully we will soon. And when we do, Lay the Land will be one of the first to know. But buying a company from a major enterprise to bring back here to Cleveland, Ohio, to continue its growth, its profitable business. And so my next chapter is continuing to juggle a lot. Still working with Graycroft and
Yeah.
some coaching, but really being focused on building, continuing to build this company. So I look forward to telling you about it.
Yeah, I look forward to learning more about it. I'm curious, maybe just as a framing in anticipation of that. I mean, ultimately, at this point, across Everstream, Findaway, Movable, Doctor's Orders, Stubl, Bloom Filter, which is a chapter we didn't even touch so much upon. For you to dive back into it, I imagine at this point in your career, you could work on basically anything that you would want. And what feels sufficiently compelling of all the things that you could choose to work on at this point? Why is this the right thing?
Yeah, I had mentioned a partner in the mix, and this person and I reconnected. And again, somebody to do something with that shares values, that As that same excitement, like let's go run through walls, and then the kind of the full circle nature of getting back into media, and it just sounded exhilarating and thrilling and like a journey. Didn't know that we would end up with this deal, right? We had it's taken a year. I had to go through a process, RFP, had to invest in attorneys and get after it. And so as it unfolded, it became more and more exciting. But really, it's again working with starting with a partner, but now we're bringing other people into the company even now. And we got to sit down and write our values down. Even though it's a profitable business, we're creating, we're building something new. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, one thing, just as we've gone through this here, is that maybe more than anyone else that I've had on the podcast so far, I feel like your journey is emblematic of a lay of the land. I mean, I kept a list here of Lee Zappis, Steve McHale, Mitch Kroll, Charlie Lougheed, Ray Leach, Mike Belsito, Robert Hatta. I mean, this is a lay of the land. And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask for your perspective on Cleveland entrepreneurship and how it's evolved and where you feel we are today and where you would like for us to go.
Yeah, well, we're blessed. We're blessed in that every one of those names, I didn't know any of those people, but I was able to pick up a phone and have a conversation. And there's obviously hundreds more on that list that,
Yeah.
from that respect, we as entrepreneurs are creating something. We're builders. And that takes a village. And we have that here in Cleveland. We have that willingness to have a conversation, to help, and I think that is only getting stronger. That notion of a village, what you and Ray and Mark are doing with the Ohio Fund, and from what Jumpstart has done over the years, we are starting to see some examples of the awesomeness that's happening around. And so, like, back to storytelling, right? If you can see something tangibly, then more and more of those can become real. And that's happening in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty exciting.
And you're a big catalyst of that too, even the show. And again, how do you create awareness around what's happening, and not just everything be dispersed? And so thank you for playing a part in all of it.
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate that. And yeah, it brings me great joy to do what I can to help as well. What does success mean to you? How do you think about what that is? And, from the outside, I feel like I could say that maybe you've achieved success, but how do you think about what it is and what ultimately is the impact that you would like to have?
Well, I have 4 kids and an amazing wife, and healthy, happy, adjusted, curious family is first and foremost a success. And so far so good, checking that box. But for me, success is, it's not a destination. Kind of back to the journey of entrepreneurship. Are you waking up in the morning? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Are you able to stretch whatever you want to stretch? Like, I'm a very curious person. So curiosity and just being able to get in and learn things is important to me. So I get to do that every day. So that to me is the epitome of that.
Yeah. No, that rings true. In this contrast between who you are and what you do, how do you feel that who you are has changed? If that's the one more grounded in fact and truth. But obviously you've learned a lot, you've done a lot. How do you feel the who you are part of that has changed as you've changed what it is that you do?
I'm still the kid that's not risk adverse at all. Part of this too, right? We didn't even get into that, but being naive, and where's your threshold and your tolerance for risk? But no, how I've changed over time is, I feel like my parents instilled great values in me. You're as good as your name. Be trustworthy. The core of who I am has not changed, but I've sharpened my skills. I've thankfully met more people who have taught me more than I could ever imagine learning. So that's just part of doing this and loving being an entrepreneur and building companies and loving it. Jeffrey, I'm going to go back to the journey thing, right? I'm evolving every day, but at the core, I am who I am, and I'm sharpening my skills, and I'm learning more from others.
What have been the biggest lessons learned? What are the ones that feel the most earned, or maybe that comes from the most painful parts, or what comes to mind when you think about the earned wisdom?
Yeah, well, I had mentioned Movable. I wrapped myself around that company and I learned a big lesson that failure is absolutely, and I've had plenty of failures too. There's other companies inside of, people are always like, well, how are you hitting every one of these? Well, I don't, and I haven't. Just so happens I've done a lot of them. But, and failure is a very, very important thing. And at that time I was fearful of failing.
Yeah.
So I recognize that failure is a great thing. And this was 10 years ago, but that was a big lesson and a piece of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, and it's certainly, I mean, to me, that's kind of beautifully illustrated by the separating of who you are and what you do, and that if you've wrapped your identity as what you do and it fails, that's a tough place
It,
to to
it,
be.
it was not a good place, but
Yeah. What else comes to mind?
wisdom over the years. Just enjoy it. It's a ride, right? It's every day. There's hardship, there's frustrations, there's just and again, I hate to be a broken record, but going back to this journey, just and remember, as an entrepreneur, you disease for me, I can't escape it.
Right.
I don't think you choose it, but you can choose to do other things. You can choose to go take that job. You can decide or choose not to create the thing or bring the idea to life that you're contemplating. You have those decisions. You have that independence to be able to take that idea forward, to be able to say no to those things. And so I'm proud that I stuck with it back in the day when I was doing concerts and then evolved and met some great mentors and built some great partnerships and it evolved and I'm glad I continued that. The one job that I was referencing was early in my career. I was at a point where I'm like, I am moving between all of these industries and I didn't really understand this notion of being an entrepreneur. Like that's what I was doing. And, I was married with my wife Michelle and I'm like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And I was like, okay, what industry do I want to work in? What companies do I want to work for? And I woke up one morning and I'm like, what am I doing? I can't have a job. I'm an entrepreneur.
Right.
So I need to get out there and observe a little more. I need to go meet 10 more people. I don't have an idea. Maybe somebody else does that I can help. Maybe something will spark and something sparks, and usually does.
Do you feel you've become better at discerning whether or not your ideas are good before you test them or build something?
Yes, and that is get out as soon as you can and get those data points. I think early on, not that there was ever a need for perfection to validate the idea. There's perfection to get it right and to get it out. But I think it was more internal, like this needs to be better to take it out versus getting out and iterating around it.
And in advance of having the data, do you feel your intuition about whether or not the data will feed the narrative, has that changed? Like your judgment, I guess is the word.
I think it's sharpened. I think I again going back to who I am, I trust my gut. I have a good gut, and I think it's sharpened over time. Yeah, I'm usually right. I'm usually pretty close. And again, and that includes throwing out 100 ideas at once, right?
Yeah. So I think we can just work to bookend the conversation here, plant a seed for what comes next, which we'll revisit hopefully soon, and unpack, I think, a lot more of your thoughts, which I could endlessly ask you about as it comes to the frameworks and mentality and tactics, which we didn't even get to yet.
I think we covered a lot. I think we hit, but
We absolutely covered a lot. I just remember you at one point had sent me really this kind of deck that outlines the whole framework. And I know we've only touched on parts of it. And all these different components are really fascinating. But maybe as we get to what you're working on next, we can use that as a reference point to, kind of round out the whole framework. Because I think it's, for one, just very interesting, but also I think pretty powerful. With that, I'll ask you a traditional closing question for Hidden Gem in Cleveland. Something other folks may not know about, but perhaps they should in the area.
So live south a bit here in Bath, and thankfully, mile radius, there's a bunch of great restaurants. One of my favorites, though, is a place called Vaccaro's, homemade pasta like you've never had. So that's Hidden Gems. I'm a big fan of your show, and people typically talk about food. So there's that one. But the biggest gem of Cleveland is north of here called Lake Erie. A big boater, maybe a little more northwest than northeast Ohio, but everywhere from Sandusky to Marblehead to Catawba to the islands. If anybody's listening and you've never been on a ferry, which goes out of any one of those ports and headed to an island, I strongly encourage it to get up there this summer and take a day trip, spend a night. But Lake Erie, it's not really a hidden gem. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, an underappreciated one, maybe. Yeah. Well, Blake, I just wanted to thank you for coming on, sharing a bit of your story. I'm excited to work through the next chapter as it transpires. But yeah, really enjoyed this.
I have too, Jeffrey. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
If folks had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, where would you point them, or to learn more, or just your location on the interwebs?
Yep, LinkedIn. I'm there. My email, I think, is on there as well, blake.squires@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Blake.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, so if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.